Swiss guards in green, white, and yellow arrived at his house early in the morning with what amounted to a brev from Pope Leo to dine at the Vatican Palace that day. It was a hardship to walk away from his work, but he had learned that one day one did not ignore the summons of a pope. Silvio laid fresh linens over his arm. Michelangelo went to the baths of the Via de' Pastini, soaked the cake dust out of his pores, and arrived at the Vatican at 11. He began to realize why the Romans were complaining that Rome has sunk to a Florentine colony, for the Vatican was filled with triumphant Tuscans, moving through the throng of more than 100 dinner guests assembled in the 2 throne rooms. He recognized Pietro Bembo, the Vatican Secretary of State and humanist poet, the poet Ariosto, who was writing his Orlando Furioso, the Neo-Latinist Sanazzaro, Guicciardini, the historian, Vida, author of the Christiad, Giovanni Rucellai, writing one of the first blank-verse tragedies, Rosmunda, Francescoro, physician author, Tommaso Ingarami, diplomat, librarian, classicist, and improviser of Latin verses, Raphael, now painting the stanza Deliodoro in the Papal Palace, and occupying a place of honor just below Pope Leo, the wood carver, Giovanni Baril of Siena, who was decorating the doors and shutters of the palace with Medici emblems. Michelangelo spied Sebastiano and was pleased that his protege had been invited. Having brought back from the Republic of Florence most of his father's great library, Leo had experts searching the world for important manuscripts. He had also brought to Rome Lazarus, his father's Greek manuscript hunter, to edit and print the jewels of Greek literature. The Pope was also in process of reorganizing the Roman Academy for Classical Studies, which had been neglected by Julius and was giving new hope of learning to the University of Rome. Michelangelo heard this new court of Leo's described as the most brilliant and cultured since imperial Rome. Throughout the long, sumptuous dinner, of which the Pope could eat little because he suffered from bad digestion and gaseous disturbances, Leo waved his white, bejeweled, plump hands while he accompanied Gabriel Marin of the unremarkably beautiful voice, the master violinist Marone of Brescia, and Raphael Lippus, the blind balladeer. Between the musical performances, buffoons kept Leo amused. His court jester, Il Magnifico's former barber, had a fund of anatomical witticisms which he unleashed between bouts of eating 40 eggs in a row, and then 20 capons, while near-sighted Leo gazed at him through his magnifying glass, emitting peals of laughter at the gargantuan gorging. The 4-hour dinner seemed endless to Michelangelo. He was incapable of absorbing but the most modest amount of salted trout, roast capon, sweet rice cooked in milk of almonds. He writhed in his seat over the many wasted hours, wondering how soon he would be released. For Pope Leo, the dinner was but a preliminary to an afternoon and night of pleasure. Now came some of Italy's finest poets to read their new verses, then a ballet, then a masque, then another buffoonery at the expense of Camillo Querno, called the arch-poet, who read from an atrocious epic poem while Leo crowned him with cabbage leaves. The entertainments would continue until Leo could no longer keep his eye open. Walking home through the dark and deserted streets, Michelangelo recalled Leo's line to Giulio immediately after his coronation: "Since God has seen fit to give us the papacy, let us enjoy it." Italy was more peaceful than it had been for a number of pontificates. True, money was pouring out of the Vatican at an unprecedented rate. Several times that day Michelangelo had seen the delighted Leo fling purses containing several hundred florins to singers and performers, which had caused one of his sober neighbors to comment, "The Pope could no more save 1,000 ducats than a stone could fly up into the sky." Leo was going to need money, millions upon millions of ducats, an even more incredible fortune for the pleasures and arts than Julius had needed for war. When he begged Cardinal Pucci, in charge of the Vatican's resources, to be sure that nothing was done that would bring dishonor on the Church, no simony, no sale of cardinalates or benefices. The cardinal shrugged and said, "Holy Father, you have assigned to me the task of financing this worldwide business. My first obligation is to keep it solvent." Michelangelo reached the Marcello dei Corvi. Michelangelo reached the Marcello dei Corvi as the midnight chimes rang out. He changed into his work clothes, so thick with the accumulation of stone dust and impregnation of sweat from the hot summer sun, they had become an extra layer of his own skin. With a sigh of relief, he picked up hammer and chisel, juggled them in both hands to feel their accustomed weight. He determined grimly that this was the last time he would be persuaded to waste an entire day. His sympathies went to pale, puffy-faced Raphael, who was summoned at all hours of the night and day for the most trivial of the Pope's errands, to give an opinion of an illuminated manuscript or design a wall decoration for Leo's new bath chamber. Raphael was always polite, interested, though forced to waste his work hours and to go without sleep. This was not for him. He was not a charming man. He would be eternally damned if he ever became one. He could lock out Rome, but the world of Italy was now the world of the Medici, and he was too closely allied to the family to escape defeat. Overcame Giuliano, the only one of Il Magnifico's sons he loved. Letters from the family in Granacci told of how magnificently Giuliano was governing Florence. Abstemious, gentle, warm-hearted, walking the streets unaccompanied, opening the Medici Palace to scholar and artist, reviving the Plato Academy, leaving the administration of government and justice in the hands of the elected councils. But these qualities did not appeal to cousin Giulio or to Pope Leo. Leo recalled his brother from Florence, and now in September Michelangelo was dressing to go to the ceremony in which Giuliano was to be made a Baron of Rome. The ceremony took place on the ancient Capitoline, just above Michelangelo's house. He sat with the Medici family, Contassini and Ridolfi with their 3 sons, Niccolo, now 12 and to be named a cardinal on the achieving 16, the older sisters, Maddalena Cibo, with her husband and 5 children, including Innocenzo, also to be made a cardinal, and Lucrezia Salviati, with a numerous family, and her son Giovanni, in line for a cardinalate. Leo had had a stage built over the ruins where son Gallo had taken Michelangelo sketching to recreate the glories of ancient Rome. The jagged earthen piazza had been covered by a wooden floor and hundreds of seats. Michelangelo listened to speeches of welcome to Giuliano from the heads of the Roman Senate, epic poems in Latin, a series of masques and satires in the Florentine tradition, watched as a woman wrapped in cloth of gold personifying Rome was carried to Giuliano's throne to thank him for condescending to Rome to become commander of the city. After body comedy by Plautus, Pope Leo bestowed privileges on Rome, such as a reduction of the salt tax, to the thunderous applause of thousands of Romans thronging the bare hillsides. Then began a 6-hour banquet with a profusion of dishes not seen in Rome since the days of Caligula and Nero. At the end of the orgy, Michelangelo made his way down the Capitoline through the throng that was being fed from the leftovers of the Saturnalia above, and locked both street doors of his house behind him. Neither he nor Giuliano nor Rome had been fooled by this performance, which was designed to conceal the fact that scholarly Giuliano, who loved the Republic of Florence, had been replaced by Lorenzo, 21-year-old son of Piero, and the ambitious Alfonsina. Young Lorenzo had been sent to Tuscany with a letter of instructions formulated by Giulio telling him how to control elections, appoint his own council, absorb the functions of government. Giulio's power as the figure behind the Pope was growing. A commission appointed by Leo had declared Giulio of legitimate birth, on the grounds that Il Magnifico's brother had agreed to marry Giulio's mother, and that only his murder in the cathedral had kept the marriage from taking place. Now that he was legitimate, Giulio was appointed a cardinal. He would have the official power to rule the church and the papal states. Now, nor was Leo and Giulio's desire to extend the Medici control throughout Italy remote from Michelangelo's affair. They had been trying to drive the Duke of Urbino, a Rovere nephew and heir of Pope Julius, out of his dukedom. Today Pope Leo had deposed the Duke as the standard-bearer of the Church in favor of Giuliano. Ultimately, Leo would seize his lands. The Duke of Urbino, and a violent man, was the one to whom Michelangelo would be responsible for Julius' tomb. The war that had been brought into the open between the Medici and the Roveres could mean nothing but trouble for the Buonarroti. Over the mild winter he secured a reprieve from Cortesina's receptions by bringing her to the workshop to see his 3 emerging figures, and from Leo's entertainments by a series of excuses, which amused Leo sufficiently to grant him the high favor of abstinence. His only associates during the long productive work weeks were his assistants in the garden. His solitary diversion, an occasional supper with a group of amiable young Florentines whose friendship was based on a nostalgic longing to be within the sight of the Duomo. Only once did he break his fast, when Giuliano came to the studio to urge him to attend to a reception for the Leonardo da Vinci, whom Giuliano had invited to Rome and installed in the Belvedere. "You, Leonardo, and Raphael are the great masters of Italy today," said Giuliano in his quiet way. "I should like the 3 of you to be friends, perhaps work together." "I'll come to your reception, Giuliano, of course," said Michelangelo. "But as for your working together, we are as different species as our birds, fish and fowl." "Strange," murmured Giuliano. "I should have thought that all artists would be brothers. Come early. I'd like to show you some of the experiments in alchemy Leonardo is conducting for me." Entering the Belvedere the next day, Giuliano took him through a series of workrooms, extensively renovated for Leonardo's purposes. Windows made taller to give higher light. The kitchen built to take care of boiling alchemy pots, a paved terrace overlooking the valley, papal palace and Sistine furniture built by the Vatican carpenters, trestle tables, stands for mixing paints. Giuliano had persuaded Pope Leo to give Leonardo a painting commission, but as Michelangelo was led through the workshops, including that of a German ironmonger, who was to help Leonardo with his mechanical inventions, he saw that Leonardo had not yet begun to work at his art. "Look at these concave mirrors!" exclaimed Giuliano. "This metal screw-cutting machine all new. When I took him out on the Pontine marshes, he located several extinct volcanoes and sketched plans for draining the fever-laden area. He won't let anyone see his notebooks, but I suspect he's completing his mathematical studies for the squaring of curved surfaces, his work on optics, his formulations of the laws of botany. Amazing." Leonardo. "He will be able to tell the age of trees by counting the rings on the trunk. Imagine. I would rather imagine him painting beautiful frescoes." Giuliano led him back toward the drawing room. "Leonardo is a universal man. Has there been such a scientific mind since Aristotle?" "I think not. Art he conceives as only one aspect of human creativity." "It is beyond my comprehension," growled Michelangelo stubbornly. "When a man has such a rare gift, he should not spend his days counting the rings on trees." Leonardo emerged, followed by his lifetime companion, the still exquisite and youthful Salai, dressed in an elaborate red blouse with lacy sleeves. Leonardo himself, Michelangelo thought, looked tired and old, his magnificent flowing beard and shoulder-length hair now white. The 2 men, who understood each other not at all, exchanged expressions of pleasure at the reunion. Leonardo, in his high-pitched voice, told Michelangelo of the time he had spent studying the Sistine ceiling. "After analyzing your work, I have written corrections to my treatise on painting. You have proved that the study of anatomy is extremely important and useful to the artist." His voice became impersonal. "But I also see a grave danger there." Nettled, Michelangelo asked, "Of what kind?" "Of exaggeration. The painter, after he studies your vault, must take care not to become wooden through too strong an emphasis on bone, muscles, and sinews, nor to become too enamored of naked figures, which display all their feelings. And you think that mine do?" Michelangelo's gorge was rising. "On the contrary, yours are close to perfection. But what of the painter who tries to go beyond you? If your use of anatomy makes the Sistine so good, then he must use even more anatomy in order to be better. I cannot hold myself responsible for later exaggerations. Nor are you, except that you have brought an anatomical painting to its outside limits. There is no margin for others to perfect. Consequently, they could have refined and improved anatomical painting for hundreds of years. Alas, you have started it, and you have ended it on one ceiling. Other guests began to arrive. Soon there was a hubbub in the rooms. Michelangelo stood alone at a side window overlooking the Sistine, not knowing whether he was perplexed or hurt. Leonardo was astonishing the guests with new contrivances, animals filled with air which sailed over everyone's head, a live lizard to which he had attached wings filled with quicksilver and whose head he had decorated with artificial eyes, horns, and a beard. The mechanical lion I made in Milan could walk several steps. He announced to the guests who were congratulating him on his inventiveness, and when you pressed a button his breast fell open, exposing a bunch of lilies. To himself Michelangelo muttered, "Questo è il colmo," this is the limit, and rushed home trembling to get the substantive feel of marble between his hands.